Hidden among the rolling hills of Hardeman County, Tennessee, the forest is quiet, and unless you know where to look, you'd never guess that this peaceful place was once one of West Tennessee's most popular destinations. People traveled for miles over rough wagon roads to reach it. Families vacationed here. A grand hotel overlooked the spring. Some believed its waters could restore their health. Today, the hotel is gone. The visitors are gone. Even the memory of Rodgers Springs is fading. So what happened? How does a place once filled with life disappear so completely that many local residents have never even heard its name? To answer that question, we're going to follow old maps, newspaper clippings, county records, and local memories to uncover the remarkable rise and quiet disappearance of Rodgers Springs. Because sometimes the greatest forgotten stories aren't hidden halfway around the world. They're waiting just down a country road.
Down in Rodgers Springs, Tennessee.
Before there was Tennessee, long before Tennessee became a state, before Hardeman County had a courthouse, before a single cabin stood among these hills, there was water, flowing day after day, century after century. For the Native American peoples who lived throughout West Tennessee, dependable springs were far more than convenient stops. They were landmarks, gathering places, and dependable sources of life. While historians cannot say with certainty that Rodgers Springs was continuously occupied, springs like this were among the most valuable places in the landscape. When European settlers eventually pushed west, they searched for the same thing people had always searched for: reliable water. Because on the frontier, a spring didn't just support a settlement, it often determined where one began. That raises an intriguing question. If this spring has drawn people here for hundreds of years, how many stories have been lost simply because no one wrote them down? Building a community. By the early 1800s, settlers were arriving in what would become Hardeman County. Life demanded constant work. Trees had to be cleared, cabins built, fields planted. Nothing came easily. But one thing the settlers didn't have to create was the spring. It was already here. Flowing steadily through the forest, it became the center of everyday life. Families hauled water from it. Livestock drank from it. Travelers stopped to rest beside it. As more people arrived, cabins slowly gave way to a small community. It wasn't planned. It grew naturally because that's how many frontier settlements began. First came the water, then came the people. Today, it's difficult to imagine the activity that once surrounded it. Children running through the trees, axes echoing through the forest, smoke curling from cabin chimneys. The quiet landscape we see today once echoed with the sounds of a growing frontier. And then something unexpected happened. People began traveling here for a reason that had little to do with farming. They came for the water itself. That simple belief would transform Rodgers Springs from a local gathering place into one of West Tennessee's most talked about destinations, the mineral spring craze. Today, if someone claimed a spring could cure illness, most people would raise an eyebrow. But in the 19th century, that idea wasn't unusual. It was everywhere. Across America, natural springs developed reputations for their mineral-rich waters. Some contained sulfur, iron, or other naturally occurring minerals. Others simply earned a reputation through word of mouth. Long before modern medicine, people were willing to travel great distances in search of relief, whether they suffered from arthritis, stomach ailments, exhaustion, or simply wanted a break from everyday life. Mineral springs offered something hospitals of the day often couldn't: hope. As the popularity of these springs grew, so did an entirely new industry. Hotels were built, bathhouses opened, newspapers advertised the health benefits of spring water. Communities that had once been little more than crossroads suddenly became destinations. Rodgers Springs was one of them. Word spread through West Tennessee that this quiet spring was worth the journey. Before long, visitors weren't just stopping for water, they were staying for days, and that changed everything. The Hotel on the Hill. Imagine arriving at Rodgers Springs in the 1880s. After hours of traveling dusty roads by horse and wagon, the trees finally opened to reveal a beautiful white Victorian hotel overlooking the spring. Its wide wraparound porch is filled with rocking chairs. Guests greet one another as new arrivals pull up in horse-drawn buggies. For many visitors, this wasn't just a stop along the road, it was a retreat. People came to escape the summer heat, breathe fresh country air, and enjoy a slower pace of life. The hotel became the heart of the community. Meals were shared, friendships were formed, business was discussed on the porch. As evening settled over the hills, lanterns flickered to life beneath the towering oak trees. Somewhere nearby, a fiddle began to play. It wasn't luxury by modern standards. But to the families who came here year after year, Rodgers Springs represented something priceless. Peace. More than a resort. It's easy to think of Rodgers Springs as simply another hotel. It wasn't. It became a gathering place. Church groups held outings here, families reunited here, neighbors who lived miles apart finally had a chance to catch up. Children spent their days exploring the woods, catching crawfish in the creek, and filling tin cups with cold spring water. For young couples, it became a place of courtship. For older generations, it became a place to remember. These moments rarely appear in history books. They're preserved instead through family stories and fading photographs. And perhaps that's the greatest tragedy. When buildings disappear, we lose more than architecture. We lose the memories attached to them. It's hard to imagine the laughter that once echoed through these trees. But while Rodgers Springs was reaching the height of its popularity, the forces that would eventually bring about its decline were already beginning to reshape America. Most people never noticed. At least, not at first. The world begins to change. History doesn't always change in dramatic moments. Sometimes it changes 1 mile of railroad track at a time. As the 19th century drew to a close, Tennessee was becoming more connected than ever before. Railroads linked distant towns. Goods traveled faster. People traveled farther. Communities located near the tracks prospered almost overnight. Those farther away often struggled to keep pace. Rodgers Springs hadn't become any less beautiful. Its water hadn't stopped flowing. The hotel still welcomed guests. But America was becoming a nation in motion. People who once vacationed close to home suddenly had more choices than ever before. Then came another revolution, the automobile. Improved roads made distant destinations easier to reach. At the same time, medical science advanced rapidly. As hospitals improved and new treatments became available, fewer people relied on mineral springs for healing. The very things that had made Rodgers Springs successful were quietly becoming less important. No disaster struck. No fire destroyed the resort. Instead, the world simply moved on. And as it did, the crowds grew smaller. When the crowds stopped coming. No one knows the exact day Rodgers Springs began to fade. There was no headline announcing its final season, no farewell celebration. Instead, the change happened so gradually that many probably didn't notice it at first. One summer, a few fewer wagons arrived. The next, several guest rooms remained empty. Repairs that once would have been made immediately were postponed until next season. Then next season became the season after that. Like many small businesses, the hotel depended on momentum. As long as visitors kept coming, the rooms stayed full, meals were served, and the porch remained alive with conversation. But once that rhythm was broken, recovery became difficult. Families discovered new vacation spots. Railroads and better roads opened destinations that had once seemed impossibly far away. As automobiles became common, travelers weren't limited to nearby resorts. They could simply keep driving. The spring hadn't changed. America had. The hotel grows quiet. Imagine returning after several years away. The same road leads to the same spring. The same oak trees still cast their afternoon shadows. But something feels different. The porch is nearly empty. The rocking chairs barely move. Paint begins peeling from the white clapboard walls. Weeds creep along the pathways where children once played. A loose shutter bangs softly in the breeze. Places rarely disappear overnight. First, they lose their visitors. Then they lose their purpose. Eventually, they lose their voice. For Rodgers Springs, that silence settled in one season at a time. The forest returns. Nature is patient. It never rushes. Once people leave, the forest quietly begins reclaiming what was borrowed. Rain finds its way through damaged roofs. Vines climb porch columns. Tree roots push beneath stone foundations. Leaves cover old walkways. Year after year, the signs of human activity become harder to see, until one day it almost looks as though nothing had ever been there. Almost. Look closely, and the landscape still tells the story. A few weathered stones, an unnatural rise in the ground, fragments of brick hidden beneath fallen leaves. These are the fingerprints of history. Searching for the past. Researching Rodgers Springs isn't like studying a famous battlefield or a state capitol. There isn't one definitive book with every answer. Instead, its history survives in scattered pieces. Old maps, county deeds, newspaper advertisements, family photographs, stories passed down from grandparents who remembered visiting the spring as children. Each clue adds another piece to the puzzle. Some questions have clear answers. Others remain mysteries. For example, local tradition has long claimed that Abraham Lincoln visited Rodgers Springs. It's an intriguing story, but historians have not found conclusive documentation confirming the visit. Does that mean it never happened? Not necessarily. But responsible history requires us to separate local tradition from documented evidence. Sometimes the most honest answer is simply, we don't know. And that's not a weakness. It's part of the investigation. Why Rodgers Springs matters. At first glance, Rodgers Springs seems like a small story. One forgotten spring, one vanished hotel, one quiet corner of West Tennessee. But look closer, and it becomes something much larger. Across America, countless communities have followed the same path. A spring, a mill, a railroad stop, a thriving gathering place. Then changing technology, shifting travel patterns, and the passage of time quietly transformed them into memories. Rodgers Springs reminds us that history isn't only found in famous cities or preserved behind museum glass. Sometimes it's hidden beneath the shade of an old oak tree. Sometimes it's waiting beside a spring that has flowed for centuries. And sometimes all it takes to bring history back to life is someone willing to ask, what happened here? The next time you travel a back road through Tennessee and notice an old foundation, a forgotten cemetery, or a weathered historical marker, don't be too quick to pass it by, because the greatest stories aren't always the ones everyone remembers. Sometimes they're the ones history almost forgot. I'm Rocky Smith, and this is Rock Solid TV. Until next time, keep searching, keep questioning, and stay rock solid.
Smith Digital Media. Small videos, big results.